There's a young Borje Salming, the actual Borje Salming rookie card from 1974-75. Here is a 13-year-old Jennifer McCreath at Maple Leaf Gardens, hanging out with Borje Salming. That would have been 1987. And there's a close-up photo of Borje's cool shades. And of course, Harold Ballard once said, "I'd never trade this guy, not even for God." But hell froze over when Borje Salming played 1 year for the Detroit Red Wings before retiring. Hi everybody, this is Jennifer McCreath. Wow. Long time ago, that picture. It was 1984 when I moved to Etobicoke, Ontario. My grandfather introduced me to watching professional hockey on television. Of course, the team was the Toronto Maple Leafs. And the star on what was a very dismal team was Borje Salming. He was a defenseman, but he was also an offensive player. He was one of the few players on the team from Sweden. One of the few people in the league at that time. He was so well loved and respected that during the Canada Cup, when Canada played Sweden in Toronto, it was Borje Salming of Sweden that got the loudest ovation. It's on YouTube. Go find it. Of course, I guess one vivid memory I have of Borje Salming was, I think it was that season, it might have been a little later that year, that he got his face stepped on by a skate. His face had to be sewed back together, over 300 stitches. Oh my goodness. Borje was a class act and represented the team and the city well. And I think it was really cool several years later when another Swede came to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and at the time was a very controversial trade. We gave up hometown, well, not from home. He's a Saskatchewanian, but he's became an adopted Torontonian, Wendell Clark. How dare you trade Wendell Clark? But guess what? We got Mats Sundin in that trade. And then a year later, Wendell would rejoin the Leafs for practically nothing. I believe it was a second-round draft pick. Cliff Fletcher. That guy made a lot of great one-sided trades that helped the Leafs do well in the 90s. And, yeah, the news, Borje Salming is, well, let's check the hockey card. He was born in 1951, April, in Corona, Sweden, of course. So that means today he would be 73 and a half. And news has broken that he has ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, and that he has now lost the ability to speak. ALS is a terrible condition. I'm not a doctor, but my understanding is ALS is some sort of plaque that builds up in your brain and essentially shuts your brain down. So you can't function, you can't talk, eventually you can't move. Terrible way to lose your dignity and suffer, but we've seen a lot of athletes come out with their stories of battling ALS, and there's a lot of media focused around them now and then. We had the famous ALS Ice Bucket Challenge about 5-6 years ago, maybe. If you follow football, I'm sure you all know who Steve Gleason of the New Orleans Saints is. God, there's a guy on the Baltimore Ravens. I can't think of his name right now. O.J. Brigance, perhaps? I don't know. It seems that the only people I've ever heard of that have this are athletes, but I don't think it's something you get by being an athlete or anything like that. But yeah, I just want everyone to remember what a great representative Borje Salming was for the city of Toronto. Sports can kind of bring the world together, and it's something I think we really need. It's been a rough couple of years. 2020, 21, 22, COVID, a lot of wars and violence and all sorts of terrible things happening in the world. And I just think back to Borje Salming, this guy from literally across the pond, Sweden, coming to Toronto, putting up with all those terrible teams and Harold Ballard. Let me tell you, the first Leaf game I ever went to in person was October 20th, 1984. So within a year of taking up an interest in the sport, I finally got to go to my first game at Maple Leaf Gardens. And the Leafs played the Quebec Nordiques. Remember them? My father was in town from Nova Scotia visiting and managed to score some tickets. We were in the, I think, Corner Reds, Maple Leaf Gardens. And oh my goodness, the Leafs got destroyed that night. It was 12-3 for Quebec. But I was happy because there was like 5 or 6 fights. Salming was not in any of those. And then, of course, yes, it would be just 2 years later, I was at my very first OHL game. And during one of the intermissions, word got out that Borje Salming was in the building. The Marlies would usually play Saturday afternoon. Well, I guess I should backtrack. Becker's was the name of a store, like a corner store that sold milk and candy bars and things like that. And if you went to Becker's, you could get some sort of a special coupon. And it would let you into the gardens at 10 o'clock in the morning. You could watch the Toronto Maple Leafs morning skate. Then you could watch their visiting team's morning skate. Then you could watch the Marley game in the afternoon. And I think the Marley game started around 2 o'clock, and back then hockey games took 3 hours, so it was 5 o'clock when the game ended. And of course the Leafs would be playing around 7:30, 8 o'clock. So the players would go home after the practice and have their nap and have their plate of pasta or whatever they would have, pre-game meal. And then they'd all start showing up at the building around 5 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock. Borje Salming was, I think, sometimes there extra early, so somehow he walked into the building during the second intermission of this Marlies game, just getting into the building early. I don't know, maybe he wanted to go work out or talk to the trainer. Of course, he got mobbed by, well, there's probably 2,000 people at the Marley game. I'm sure half of them found out Borje Salming's in the hallway. And he shook hands, took pictures, signed autographs for about an hour. And I was on the west side of the building, and I remember hearing about this. I ran all the way around to the east side of the building, and that's where, of course, this photograph was taken. And on the back, a few months later, I would run into Borje again, and he would autograph it. Back then, it was ballpoint pen. I don't think the Sharpie had been invented yet. So most of my autographs from the 80s are all in pen. It wasn't until 92, I believe, when Sharpies kind of became a thing. I think I got this one signed too. Chicken scratch. Yeah, I guess this video's just to talk about ALS, really. Borje Salming being one of many athletes affected. And I don't know. It sounds like Borje is going downhill pretty quickly. And getting ALS at 72, 73, how old did we say he was? 72? I guess when you're 72, your immune system just isn't quite able to fight it off. Some of these younger athletes. I mean, it's terrible to get ALS when you're 25, 30 years old, I'm sure. But yeah, it's not something anyone wants, I'm sure. And there's a lot of medical conditions out there, and they all deserve worthy attention in terms of research and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I don't know if this video is going to add any value to the world. Of course, part of my channel is just sharing my unique life, and I think it's pretty cool. Here I am out here in Newfoundland, and yeah, haven't watched as much hockey in recent years. I've kind of transitioned over to football, and of course tennis was my first sport that well, the only real sport I played with any level of seriousness. And of course golf. As a Leaf fan, we all took up golf at the end of March because we knew the Leafs were never in the playoffs back in the 80s. But yeah, things would change. 92, 93, Dougie Gilmour, Matt Sundin, those teams are really good. Unfortunately, Salming, when was this card? 1989 was his last year. We'll make you an honorary member of the 92 team, Salming. How's that? Because, yeah, you literally kept this team afloat. 1,292 penalty minutes. God, he had 170 penalty minutes in 1 year? I don't remember Salming being a goon or anything like that. Look at these points. 78 points in 76 games. And 4 years in a row he had over 70 points. My goodness. The year I took the picture, he played 56 games. Anyway, probably rambled on long enough. But yeah, one more look at the rookie card, because that's really cool. Borje Salming. Let's see what the card says. For the record, this card's in pretty rough shape, so. But it's authentic. Although he didn't get a lot of attention at first, Borje quickly developed into a legitimate contender for Rookie of the Year honors in the NHL. Trained in the European style of play, he adjusted perfectly the NHL style and was Toronto's top defenseman during the second half of last season. He's good with the puck and something, it's all scratched out on the back. He's a smart stick handler. Well, the rest is dans le français. Anyway, this card is, yeah, it's older than I am. This card came out October 73, which was just a few months before I came along. And believe me, I'm pretty beat up too, just like this card. You've seen my videos about my knee injury. We won't get into that though, but yeah, very good memories of watching the Leafs and Borje Salming. Might say get well soon. I don't know if that will work, but we're thinking of you, Borje, all the way out here in Newfoundland, Canada, and of course back home in Toronto. You got 3 million Leaf fans there. Wishing you the best as you deal with this difficult situation, and thank you for everything you've given to the Toronto Maple Leaf community, and you take care the best you can. And a big shout out to your family and friends looking after you. I'm sure it's got to be difficult, but yeah, we love you, Borje, and we'll sign off now. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for watching my video.